Thank you so very much for joining us. I'm Mina Miller, founder and artistic director of Music of Remembrance. Welcome to Insights, our new series of informal conversations with MOR composers and performers in our concert programs. In ordinary times, I'd be sharing these thoughts and introducing you to our program and artists in person on a live stage. Well, these are not ordinary times, but I'm so happy that you're with us today as we reach out online to our Insights Conversation series. We'll be offering these programs throughout our season of virtual concerts. Our very first concert takes place on November 1. It's just around the corner. And if you haven't already, please visit our website for information on how to access it online. The program features the Northwest premiere of Haim by Russian-born composer Polina Nazaykinskaya. The work, whose title means life in Hebrew, is a musical tribute to David Arben, a survivor of 3 concentration camps and 4 labor camps, who as a young boy was saved by his violin when he was pulled from a crowd of some 105 prisoners waiting to be shot or buried alive by the SS. After the war, he came to America, penniless and barely speaking a word of English. He was admitted to Philadelphia's Curtis Institute of Music and later spent 34 years in the Philadelphia Orchestra, more than a dozen as Associate Concertmaster. It's been said that his life was one of successes and miracles. It also reveals a journey of hope and perseverance. Today, I'm delighted to have with us composer Polina Nazaykinskaya, Rebecca Jackson, the gifted violinist who studied with David Arben and who commissioned the work Haim. She's also co-authored biography of the late violinist with her father. Polina joins us from Connecticut and Rebecca from California. And joining us from Seattle are 3 of our artists who you can hear on Sunday, November 1 in our performance of Haim: clarinetist Laura DeLuca, pianist Jessica Choe, and baritone director Erich Parce, who narrates Arben's life story. Thank you so very much for being with us. Before we get into their comments, which I know you will appreciate very much, I think you'll be touched by watching a news feature from 1997 about David Arben's first return to his native Poland more than 50 years later.
I have a special story for you tonight. 5 decades ago, U.S. troops freed David Arben from a Nazi concentration camp in Poland. He began a new life in America as a concert violinist right here in Philadelphia, but returned to Poland last month to bring closure to the nightmare of his younger days. In this News 3 special report, David Arben shares his emotional journey with you.
Well, when I first arrived in Warsaw, got off the airplane, I couldn't breathe. For about 3 minutes, I thought something terrible was going to happen to me.
56 years ago, something terrible did happen to David Arben and his family in Warsaw. They were rounded up by the Nazis and sent to concentration camps. David was the only member of his family to survive the Holocaust.
It wasn't an easy decision for me to go to Poland, to go to Warsaw.
Hardly a sentimental journey, Arben returned to his native Poland last month at the request of the committee putting together Israel's 50th anniversary celebration.
I realized that this is the only time that I can give the dignity to my family. And the fact that the Philadelphia Orchestra was at the same time in Warsaw made it easy for me.
easy because the Philadelphia Orchestra has become Arben's second family. In 1959, he joined the orchestra as a concert violinist, playing with them until his retirement in 1993. But David Arben's trip to Warsaw rekindled bittersweet memories. He walked the streets near his hotel, tracing the steps he took as a young boy.
I had the strangest feeling. I had a feeling that I'm just a ghost. I was looking at everybody passing by, hoping for something impossible. Maybe someone will recognize me. Maybe, perhaps I will recognize someone. But this was just a dream.
Arben says the high point of his trip was returning to the synagogue, where his father took him as a child.
I had this unbelievable sensation that my family was with me. Spiritually, they were with me. I saw them. I felt them. It was a strange feeling that I was so close, and yet I could not touch them.
He couldn't touch them, but he touches us with his story and his music. And when he played his violin at Warsaw's only remaining synagogue, he played for his family. I have to tell you that talking to David Arben is an inspirational experience. He is a man of courage whose story must be heard by future generations. Right now, he is the family that survives, the only one left to keep the flame of love and respect glowing.
Rebecca, I'd love to start the conversation with you. You introduced me to David Arben's life story and shared the work of Haim, and you who studied with him knows him best of all at this point. Could you please share some thoughts? Thank you for joining us.
Of course, thank you, Mina. If one is truly blessed, there is a person who will come into your life and have a profound impact. And for me, that person was Mr. David Arben. I was 17 when I met him in Puerto Rico at a music festival. I wrote him a card of thanks, and after that summer, his reply was the beginning of what would become one of my most treasured friendships. Throughout my studies at Juilliard, I would take the bus, the Greyhound bus, to visit him, spending countless long, uninterrupted afternoons learning from him about music and life. In 2008, I started a chamber music festival in my hometown of Santa Cruz, and it's called Music in May. Mr. Arben met my family for the first time, and he would come annually and stay with my family. In 2012, I felt the best way to celebrate Music in May's fifth anniversary was by commissioning a new chamber work inspired by the life of my mentor, David Arben. Polina was highly recommended, and even though we first met by email and over the phone, I immediately sensed a depth of character, her heart, her humanity. And to me, these are all things that make up the most sought after artists. My instinct couldn't have been more correct. Worth repeating, the title of Polina's work is Haim, and that's the name Arben was given when he was born in 1927. In preparation for this webinar, I've been thinking back to that weekend of the premiere in 2012, and what stands out, besides Mr. Arben saying what a gifted composer Polina is, it's after we performed, after all of us took our bows with Mr. Arben, we gathered in the wings of backstage. And as he expressed his appreciation, he was moved to tears. There was so much love and so much embracing. It has been a profound journey bringing this piece to life with Polina and our colleagues to many more audiences since 2012. Arben attending most of these performances till his passing. I know each time Polina's music is played, the spirit of Arben soars and he will live on forever. I'm very thankful to Mina, Music of Remembrance, and to each of the artists here today with us for being a part of his extraordinary legacy.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Polina, it's very special to have you with us, have the composer of this piece. Could you offer some reflections about David Arben? It's quite a challenge to write a piece about a living Holocaust survivor. What was that experience of meeting him, getting to know him?
was just incredible. It was magical. I have here a photo from the premiere. And on this photo, you'll see Rebecca, myself, and David Arben, and wonderful musicians who later became my very dear friends. To this day, for instance, this is Konstantin Zukovetsky, and he's like a brother to me. So this piece gave me so many wonderful friendships. Most importantly, of course, the friendship with David Arben. I was 24 years old when I wrote this piece, and because I was rather young, I was very brave. I allowed myself to just let my imagination and my heart dive deep into David Arben's life story. And it took me about 3 weeks to write this piece. I don't remember much from it, to be honest. I was in a trance, I was in a sort of a zone. And I'm very grateful because basically music just happened by itself. I didn't control it very much, it just happened. And I was very scared, at the dress rehearsal where David Arben was in attendance, I was very scared. I didn't want to hurt him more with my piece. I wanted to provide some reflection on his life in a very positive way, yet the music literally reflects on his life journey. So it goes through those nightmares. You'll hear it in the piece. There will be a lot of dissonances, a lot of pain in the music. And I remember that at the end of the rehearsal, he came on stage and he put his big hand onto my shoulder and he said, "You did good, kid, you did good." So he was just so wonderful and kind. And being a great violinist himself, and being a great artist and a great human, it couldn't mean more for me to hear him speak so highly about the piece, and the fact that he liked it still is a pinnacle of my life. When I am feeling not so great, I remember that moment and immediately I feel better because David Arben liked my music. It means a lot. As a person, he was just amazing. He was so cheerful. He loved people. He loved smoking his cigars. He loved a little bit of scotch. He was always joking. He was always smiling. And you would never believe that he went through such awful things in his life, because he was just so full of life, so loving, so generous, and so kind to people. So the fact that I knew him, it means a lot to my life right now. So I'm very grateful that I had this experience.
Well, thank you so much for sharing those reflections. You helped capture, both you and Rebecca, his warmth and his humanity. And it's wonderful to be able to impart that to us through your words as well as through your music. Let's listen to David Arben's life story in his own words, which are narrated in Haim. We feature in our performance actor Erich Parce.
Little did I know when I was a child that my interest in the violin would save my life. When I was young, my father used to take me to the barber shop, where there were 3 barbers, and on the wall was a violin and a bow. When one of the barbers didn't have a customer, he would take down the violin and bow and play popular songs. The other barbers would sing along. I was enchanted with the sound of the violin. Upon returning home, I picked up 2 sticks, making believe I was playing the violin and singing along just like the barbers. This continued for some time. When I reached the age of 7, I was stricken with scarlet fever. My parents, knowing what the violin meant to me, kept telling me, "You get better and we will get you a violin." I recuperated, and my parents kept their promise. My father took me to the best teacher in Warsaw. I made great progress. Everybody was proud of me, and people spoke to my parents of my talent. After 9 months, I'd already played a recital at the Chopin Academy of Music in Warsaw. One of the most significant experiences happened when I was 9. My father took me to a concert of the Warsaw Philharmonic with Ephraim Zimbalist playing the Beethoven Violin Concerto. This experience impressed me so much that it became my dream to study with this great artist. The war started in 1939 when I was 12 years old. I am convinced that without the love and devotion of my family in the early years, I could not have survived the tortured existence in the Nazi concentration camps. I am the sole survivor of my family. I attribute my survival to the violin. In 1943, the Nazis selected 105 people deemed too young, sick, and old to be executed by firing squad. Being in front of the grave prior to the execution, I was plucked from the group by an influential individual who knew me to be a talented violinist. My devotion and love of playing the violin persisted even under the most unimaginable circumstances the world has ever known. In 1944, in the infamous Flossenburg concentration camp, I attempted to play in the camp orchestra. At first, I was refused because Jews were excluded from the orchestra. The Flossenburg camp had about 11% Jews. The rest were from all over Europe, all nationalities and different religions. The conductor of the orchestra was also a prisoner who was there because he was a German against the Nazi party and regime. He was also against the Jews. The main Nazi commandant of Flossenburg would visit the camp 2 to 3 times a week, and he would shoot someone dead each time he visited. I must have lost my mind because I ran up to him and said, "I'm a violin virtuoso, as my mother used to call me. The conductor of the concentration camp orchestra told me I couldn't play because he did not allow any Jews in the orchestra." The commandant said, "You come with me." We found that conductor, and I was permitted to play with the orchestra. Within days after liberation of the concentration camp, I obtained a violin and soon thereafter joined the ex-concentration camp orchestra in Munich, Germany. My dreams of studying with Ephraim Zimbalist came alive as I worked toward this goal. I left Germany for Geneva and became a student at the Geneva Conservatory. I finally arrived in the United States in 1949 and soon fulfilled my lifelong dream of having an audition with Ephraim Zimbalist and being accepted as his student at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. After graduating from Curtis, my professional career began in 1954 with the Detroit Symphony. Immediately following that year, I joined the Cleveland Orchestra for the next 4 years, from 1955 to 1959. I made my American solo debut in 1957 with the Cleveland Orchestra playing the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. After Cleveland, I spent 34 years with the Philadelphia Orchestra, soloing with them many times. I retired as the Associate Concertmaster in 1993. Before my retirement, I was active as a soloist in the United States, Europe, Asia, Mexico, South America, and I've been able to pass along this art by teaching and giving master classes. I consider myself to be very fortunate to have been able to create a life of harmony, joy, and wonderful friendships. The violin is the best thing that ever happened to me. It gave me life. For me, music is life. Music is hope. Music is peace. I cannot ask for more.
Thank you, Erich. Erich, I'd love for you to comment about your experience working on Haim and your performance and your work with MOR.
Well,
thank you for being with us. Thank
you, Mina. First, let me say it's such a pleasure, honor to meet Polina and Rebecca, because, you know, as an actor, as an artist, looking at the script, I did all the research I could do to come up with who I thought or who I felt that David Arben was. But it's so nice to hear the actual stories and to the joy that I was able to kind of glean from the writings, from everything, to see in Polina's face as she describes what it was like to be with him, to make music with him. You know, I wish I would have seen that before I did the monologue, but it was obvious to me who David was. And it was also great to find out, just a few minutes ago that his original name by his parents was Haim, because that really sums up his life. I mean, his love of life, his love of his family being with him the whole time. You could see how powerful that was. The telling of the story was easy in one sense because it so made sense, and it was so visceral. It's hard to believe that a 12-year-old boy, could possibly have survived so many different things. I mean, how many camps was he in? He was in 7 different, well, either they weren't all concentration camps, but 7 different internments. And the fact that he was able to stay joyful through that time. I mean, it's such a great statement for us today as we live in our own little internments in our houses, and we think it's bad. Oh my God, compare it to what this 12-year-old boy went through. One nice thing, at least for me, in terms of research for who David was, having been with Music of Remembrance for the last 22, 23 years, I've done a lot of different pieces, and especially pieces that involved children. We did the opera Brundibar, which was done by all the kids in Terezin, very powerful work, and how the kids, stayed joyful through that whole thing. The wonderful piece, Vedam, which was the boys that kept a diary of what life was like, gives you such insight into what it's like to be a child within these camps. Farewell Auschwitz, as he got older, and dealing with the family. Your family has died and you're in a camp. All of this, Mina, Polina, Rebecca, everyone that was involved, all of this has really, given me such insight as a person and in my life as to what it's like to be a survivor, and how we can all live as survivors. I know that's kind of a big statement, but it's so true. It's so inspiring to meet within this dialogue David Arben.
Thank you, Erich. You've given us a lot to ponder. Polina, you have written so eloquently about your work, Haim. I'd like to share your words with our viewers before we get into a discussion of the piece. If you mind, I'm going to quote you. Haim is a portrait of the grit and grace of survival, a depiction of extraordinary perseverance in the face of unimaginable circumstances. It's a harrowing soundscape, juxtaposes a harrowing soundscape of battle with a plaintive motif of the Jewish Shema prayer, calling on us to imagine a young boy scared and hungry and holding onto his life with his violin, desperately playing as if it would be for the last time. And after all the nightmares are over, the piece ends on a tone offering hope for the start of a better life. Polina, could you share some reflections about the music itself? Thank you.
Of course. I wanted to portray David with one of the instruments of the ensemble, and I decided that David will be reflected by the sound of the clarinet. So in the clarinet part, you will hear a lot of cries, a lot of long notes, as if a young boy is crying. So you will literally hear that. And the first violin is actually, I was imagining that first violin part is presenting David's violin. So there's a moment in the piece where David and his violin are trying to cope together with what's happening. And I remember David Arben describing that when he got the violin first time for several months, he couldn't really play because his hands were so tired from labor. And he was a violin virtuoso, so for him it was a big tragedy that he couldn't play. And he described how difficult it was for him to start playing, and he would start and drop and then start again. So I wanted to portray this particular moment in the piece. In the middle section, you'll hear that. And then finally, when he was able to play, the clarinet and violin, they will join in harmonious line together, singing in unison and in thirds and in beautiful harmony.
By listening to a few minutes of Haim, the music that immediately follows the narration that we just heard. Our performers are violinists Misha Schmidt and Natasha Vajanov, violist Susan Golkas Asadi, cellist Walter Gray, clarinetist Laura DeLuca, and pianist Jessica Choe. That's one powerful piece, as you're beginning to experience, and one can just sense the heartfelt sentiment of this and your dedication and passion in your writing, Polina. It's just really amazing. I'm so glad you mentioned before about this time in David Arben's life after the war where he actually couldn't play the violin. And I remember in hearing the piece, and even in your directions to performers, you said something about playing it as an out-of-tune violin. And I'm so glad that you've offered us some context for that. Do you want to share a little bit more? Because we're going to share that section with our audience. Any more that you would like to tell us?
So at the beginning of this section that you're describing, you'll hear the violin as if it was tuning. Da, da, di, da, da, da. So it's not with the music, really. You'll hear the sound of a tuning violin. I literally mimicked, I'm a violinist, by the way. My first instrument is violin. So I remembered how I would tune, I would play open strings first, and then start tuning. But it happened that this moment arrived in the piece in E flat minor. So it wasn't open strings, there was no A, no D. So I had to, I had to transpose the open strings into B flat, E flat, but it actually was easier to, mimic the sound of tuning violin by slightly shifting up and down as if it was open strings, but with a peg. So it's much more economical. You don't have to actually tune the violin, but the sound is really the tuning violin. And then he starts to play the melody and he drops and it starts again. So yes.
It's very powerful and it's a very haunting moment. I'd like to share it with our audience. The solo violinist that you'll hear is Misha Schmidt. It's very touching, very beautiful. I'd like to invite the performers you've been listening to join us in conversation. Laura DeLuca, Jessica Choe, and Erich, if you want to come back, it's up to you too. By the way, those of you that are watching this performance, it is a performance you'll be able to see beginning November 1, and you might be wondering what these yellow flowers, blossoms, are doing on the stage. They relate to our season's theme, endurance of hope. And the symbol of the ginkgo symbolized that theme of hope. The ginkgo trees, some of them planted near the center of the atomic blast in Hiroshima, survived the inferno because of their resilience and deep roots, and have come to represent the endurance of hope. And so we thought it would be very meaningful to have these ginkgo leaves all over our stage as we try to invoke that theme and to give us all the hope to move forward. So Laura, I'd like to start with you. I have to confess that, having the most wonderful artists to play for Music of Remembrance, I often look for a composition not only about the message of the piece and how powerful the work is, but what will it offer for our great artists to do on stage. And I heard this piece and thought, wow, what a clarinet part. This is a Laurie piece. And so I was very grateful that we could program it during COVID, and you found a way of playing the clarinet during COVID for our concert. Could you talk something about this?
Well, it was a very wonderful experience to dive into Polina's piece. Of course, it has its challenges, having to separate distance from each of the musicians, especially as a wind player. I exude aerosols, which is dangerous.
Better, I guess.
So as you saw, I was way in the back against the wall. Jessica had her back to me, but we managed. And so I feel like the performance captured the drama of this piece, the intensity, the clarinet, of course, playing the role of this young person wailing, screaming, having nightmares. This comes out of the klezmer tradition of using the clarinet as a premier melodic instrument, as well as the violin. So I was thrilled that Polina decided to use the clarinet in this way. And what I love about this piece is the intuitive, expressive quality of performing it. There are moments of technical, rhythmic precision that has to happen, but the clarinet often is riding above this quartet, and of course, adding the piano as a rhythmic machine. Not necessarily a machine, but setting down the tension of what was happening to this young person and the landscape, so to speak, and the terror. There was always this drive, you're going somewhere, but you don't know exactly where you're going. And there's highs and lows, bursts of crescendi, and then moments of repose. And these moments of repose, were almost aleatoric in quality, meaning not really having a definite structure, tight rhythm, but one of almost just breathing naturally and resting in reflection. So I don't want to steal Jessica's fire, because as the pianist here, the piano played a very important role in helping set up a lot of the drama. So maybe Jessica, you want to add?
At our first rehearsal, this is days before the recording, we had some we weren't really, we were just trying to put it together. And at one point, Laurie said, guys, there's a video of this on YouTube. And so I came home and watched the YouTube video. And there were several things that struck me. first, I was just tickled to see a couple of my old classmates from Juilliard, Rebecca being one of them. And second, there were 2 pianos in the original version. And third, Polina was conducting in this video. So for me, I took over the 2 pianos. It was condensed into 1 piano in our version, and we didn't have a conductor. So I decided to reach out to Polina, and we had a FaceTime session, which was incredibly helpful and insightful. One of the hardest things for me was in the introduction because it's very sparsely written. And at our first rehearsal, we were all kind of feeling the beats differently. And to that, she said, it's not, don't try to kind of line things up. We should all kind of feel the space in between the notes. And it doesn't matter if we're feeling it differently, as long as it just kind of organically comes together. And that was really, really helpful. And then, in the main section, I was, of course, just up and down, like hitting the strings and getting back to the keys.
You're playing inside the piano as much as you're playing on the keys.
Right. And so right before the recording, I made an executive decision to take off my shoes. I kept slipping on my heel every time I got up and coming back to play the keys. So, I mean, it was just an incredible experience. And for me, having this conversation with Polina beforehand was just really meaningful and very, very insightful.
Thank you. Polina, what is it like to hear your music played by other performers than the original cast and different narrator? How do you react?
Well, when I heard a little bit of the recording, I was just the happiest composer on earth because it's a spectacular performance.
Make our composers happy. We like them to come to Seattle and meet the composer, and they say, "I'm the luckiest composer in the world." And
Yes.
we feel they are, because our artists are the best in the universe, and we're so fortunate that many of them have been playing with MOR for 22 years. This is year 23, and their dedication is an inspiration to me, and I'm just enormously grateful. Erich, do you have any more to add? You were the narrator, but you're still part of the piece, and how does it feel?
As I was listening to Lori and Jessica talk, I got to sit there and watch all of the rehearsals of this piece. And that's something that most people don't get to do. They see the final product, but to listen to the dialogue, to watch the performers figure out what the piece is about, how to do it, take your shoes off if you have to, whatever works, moving around so that you can see and feel each other and all of the stuff that you have to do. It's so exciting to see a piece be born like that. And I wish people could see more of that. I always felt that doing an opera or whatever. I wish people could come to the rehearsals and watch how it's all put together. But this piece in particular, I loved watching it just all come to fruition.
Well, I'm grateful to our artists to produce this piece during a pandemic. As you noticed, everyone was wearing masks. They're positioned 6 feet apart, and rehearsals were challenging. And everyone had to have the COVID test right before, and we tried to do everything right, from playing with open windows and doors and just going the extra mile. And your dedication, as I say, is an inspiration to me. Polina, you recently sent us another one of your Holocaust-inspired pieces that followed Haim, a song cycle, Theresienstadt. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, it happens that I have 2 major pieces on the subject, and I feel very grateful for the opportunity to write something like that. So I had a concert at the Academy of Vocal Arts in Philadelphia, where my other vocal cycle was performed based on Anna Akhmatova's poetry. And after the concert, I was approached by a very beautiful woman who introduced herself as the widow of a Holocaust survivor poet, Mirko Tuma. Her name is Carol Leeds. And she said, I have this poetry. Would you like to look at it and try to write music? And I said, of course, please send me the poems on my email. And when I read the poetry, I was just amazed on how powerful this text was. And I jumped right in. And when I was done about 4 weeks later, it took me only 4 weeks to write a 25-minute vocal cycle. Again, I went into this zone. So powerful, very powerful text, very painful. And when I was done, we talked with Carol about how we can organize a concert and also to include Haim on the concert. So we had the premiere of Theresienstadt and Haim on the same program. And for me and Rebecca, it was very important to play Haim in Philadelphia because many of David Arben's friends were still alive, former Philadelphia Orchestra musicians who were now in their 90s or 80s, late 80s. So, pretty old musicians. And it was very important for me and Rebecca to show that piece and for David to be in the audience. So we combined the performance in the world premiere of Theresienstadt and Philadelphia performance of Haim in one concert, thanks to Carol Leeds, who organized the concert, who find the money to pay for the venue, who hired the musicians. And it was just a wonderful experience.
Well, let's listen to some of this song cycle. The poetry is by Mirko Tuma, who survived the Theresienstadt camp. He was a poet, a playwright, and a critic. We're going to hear an excerpt from the final song, which is titled Theresienstadt. And the performance is by bass baritone Vartan Gabrielian and pianist Elisa Leiser. It is the world premiere performance, and it's from October 2016, Philadelphia's Ethical Cultural Society. Another very powerful work, and I hope that that work also gets many performances so that you can share the words, the music, and the story. We're coming to the end of our program, and I wonder if there are any more reflections that you would like to leave our viewers with. Rebecca, do you have some words to share?
Yes. First, I just wanted to thank you again. I really am so grateful to you and Music of Remembrance and all the musicians here that are continuing David Arben's legacy. Polina's music really has had a ripple effect since then. The musicians, we've started Sound Impact, which is an organization helping people in all sorts of ways. And that performance that Polina talked about in Philadelphia with Mr. Arben in attendance, that was just months before he passed. And around that same time, this photograph is from his 89th birthday. He didn't quite make it to 90, so it's just very grateful. I know that seems to be a popular word during this webinar. We began with a news clip from 1997 featuring David Arben's return to Warsaw, the one and only time he returned to visit the synagogue he grew up attending as a boy named Haim Arbeitman. He recited Kaddish in memory of his family, and I will now read the final paragraph of chapter 12 from his biography. David came to the end of his one and only return to a land where he had spent the precious handful of years with his father Abraham, mother Chaya, brother Israel, and sister Zisla. A legacy for the parents and siblings he lost, Arben had an abiding wish, the fulfillment of which felt essential for a better future. He said, "I hope humanity can find some kind of greater tolerance towards others."
Thank you for leaving us with those powerful words. The words that will resonate with me forever are his lines: music is life, music is hope, music is peace. It's a great gift that you've brought this incredible piece into the world to share his story, and we're eager to share it with you. Our performance opens, so to say, premieres on Sunday, November 1, 5 p.m. Pacific time. And if you purchase access to the single concert, you'll be able to watch it anytime, 24/7 for a period of a week. And if you purchase our entire series of virtual concerts, 4 concerts, you'll be able to watch this program for 6 months. And you'll get to know it very well. So we hope you'll be joining us. We are going to be offering another Insights conversation next week, Thursday, October 29th at noon Pacific time. And our conversation is about the Hans Gall piano trio that's on our program. We'll be speaking with the composer's daughter and the composer's grandson, as well as performers in that program, pianist Craig Shepard and baritone director Erich Parce. We hope you'll be with us. All you need to do is go onto our website and register online. So we've come to the end of our program, and it's been a pleasure to spend this hour with you. We miss you all. We wish we were on the live stage, and it's just so meaningful to us to be able to reach out to you in this virtual space and to make what is a disadvantage an advantage. I hope you take good care of yourself and your loved ones, and that we see you again soon. Thank you so very much for being with us. We look forward to seeing you on November 1. Thank you.